gets involved. We've got another question related to this, and then I'll bring you in, Andrew. Hang on a second. The question is from Loretta Little.
Thanks, Tony. The Nobel Prize winning economist Joseph Stiglitz totally rejected the trickle-down theory of economics, where if you take care of the rich, the benefits will flow down to all. Why has the coalition designed the budget around the fallacy of Reaganomics and the Laffer curve?
I'll actually come to this side of the panel first, and I'll start with you, Andrew. We want to hear from Ines pretty quickly.
Loretta, I think you're absolutely right to talk about trickle-down economics, because this budget is premised on the notion that if we give a big tax cut to millionaires, a $17,000 tax cut to millionaires, that they'll employ more maids. And that notion simply misses the point that Duncan made. And Duncan, I wish your little girls were here to hear the way you made the most articulate critique of this year's budget that I've heard from anyone. Because you so clearly pointed out the value of money differs according to how much of it you've got. And that's why we believe that egalitarianism matters in Australia. We have this great bedrock of egalitarian values, a nation that doesn't stand up when the Prime Minister enters the room, doesn't much like tipping, where many of us sit in the front seat of taxis. But that's at threat from the rise in economic inequality we've seen in Australia, and at a time when earnings have risen 3 times as fast for the top 10th as the bottom 10th, the last thing we need is a budget that takes $4,500 away from a parent with 2 kids in high school and gives $17,000 to someone with $1 million income.
But you're supporting their tax cuts. You're supporting the tax cuts to the top 25% of income earners. That's $4 billion less to fund it. There's no point in growing the pie if only the rich get to eat the pie. Like, why?
But it's just that's just not a... I mean, Adam, you are actually you are a nice and a smart person, and that does you no justice and no credit to say that. We have a we do have a progressive system here. I mean, you talk about millionaires and $17,000 tax cuts. I mean, if you're talking about somebody on $1 million, which is very few people in this country who are earning an income of that, they're also paying about $450,000 of tax because we have a progressive tax system. And that money goes into the welfare system, which actually helps people.
Let's go into the detail. The corporate tax cuts are going to cost $50 billion, best part of, over the next decade. Now, $7 billion of that goes to the big 4 banks. Now, do you, the most profitable in the world, do you really think that when they get $7 billion, they're going to employ $7 billion worth of people? Like, that's not what is going to happen with
Adam,
it. That's why Reaganomics
I'm going to cut you off because I want to hear from the other side of the table. I want to hear from a business perspective.
I've tried to be really polite. Duncan, I'll be harsh in my message. If you're on the minimum wage and with the family, you would not pay much tax, if any at all. Would you? You would not pay much tax.
Sorry, Duncan wanted to respond to that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I pay tax every time I go to the supermarket. Every time I hop in my car.
As does everybody else who goes to the supermarket. So we have a situation here where not everyone can win out of every budget every time. It's not how the system works, and it's what the government has made a choice here, and I'll sort of talk on their behalf, although I'm not a member of the government. They've made a choice to actually try to create a situation where we can create jobs for Duncan's children, where we can create investment that doesn't come into the country now to provide for growth. Now, Adam talks about the corporate tax cut, as if it's Satan incarnated. What, according to the head of Treasury, it will do is actually drive $160 billion into the economy over 10 years. That's a pretty good return on a $50 billion investment. That will create the jobs of the future. That will create the investment of the future. That will create the opportunities of the future. That's what the business is trying to do. It will not create profits. So it's a pretty dark view of the world, Adam, that you have.
I'd rather put that money into an industry policy for Victoria, for the people who won't be able to build subs in South Australia and are about to lose their jobs. I'd rather that money goes into creating jobs of the future rather than to the banks for extra profits.
It will be creating the jobs of the future as business seeks to invest and grow. I mean, otherwise what you're going to do is you're going to have no investment in Australia. We pay proportionately the second highest rate of corporate tax in the OECD in Australia. It drives investment away. If you took the time to talk to any business person, they would say, Adam, when we look at investing in Australia, we look at your tax regime as a key part of it and as a disincentive to bring jobs, growth, innovation and opportunities.
So let's give tax
Australia.
breaks to the kind of industries that we want, like renewables, like medical
about small
research.
business?
But let's not give it to
Adam,
the banks.
Hold on.
I'm just going to impose a small amount of order on the conversation, and I will throw to Andrew Lee to hear what Labor's position is here, because you are supporting some of these tax cuts, that is to small business, but not to bigger business. So why make this distinction?
That's right, Tony. So the definition of small business in Australia is 2 million and under, and as Bill said in his budget reply last year, we're keen for those firms to get a tax cut. But we don't believe that with the deficit now higher than when it was in the Coalition One office, with debt up by $5,000 per Australian, it's the right time to give a $50 billion tax cut to some of the largest companies in Australia. And let's be clear how this works in the Australian context. We have dividend imputation, unlike almost all the rest of the OECD. So the effect of a company tax cut is mostly to funnel money to foreign shareholders. Now, Labor strongly supports foreign investment, but we have to be clear-eyed about who gets the benefits of this tax cut. Then the models anticipate, and this is the most optimistic scenario that Kelly and Innes would be putting to you, that ultimately those foreign shareholders will look to invest more in Australia, and that might flow through to higher household incomes. Treasury's own models have that being a 0.1% effect over the long run, with wage effects 7 to 10 years out. So if the Coalition's true promise is, with wage growth at a 30-year low, you're going to get a wage increase in 2026, it suddenly starts to look a whole lot less attractive, particularly if it then causes Moody's to take away our AAA credit rating.
Let me quickly go to Innes on this. Could you just address the dividend imputation issue? Paul Keating has been saying this for a very long time, that the people who benefit most from this corporate tax cut at the higher end are foreign shareholders.
Well, we've looked at putting forward the possibility of scrapping dividend imputation. That's a perspective.
But it hasn't been done.
No, but it's an option.
So why support the tax cut until you do it?
Because what you'll get from a tax cut as it is phased in, a corporate tax cut, just think of it this way, Tony, 0.1% of Australian businesses pay 60% of the corporate tax. They're at the big end. They are the last to get it in 2023, 24. Until then, a range of smaller businesses, currently now with the turnover of 10 million and it ratchets it up, will get the benefit of a tax cut and then benefit from accelerated depreciation. That will help them. It's a phased-in measure that will help smaller businesses who do, quite frankly, most of the employing. And that's the key thing to take into account. It's not the top end of town getting a tax cut. First of all, I want to hear from
Cassandra, then I'll come to Kelly.
It's not the top end of town getting a tax cut tomorrow. That's what needs to be kept in mind.
Look, I said earlier, let's make sure that we do have a few of the facts that we're clear rather than perceptions. One of the first facts, and it comes from the Treasury's own tax discussion paper, is that we are one of the lowest taxing countries in the OECD.
And one of the highest corporate taxing
overall, in terms of the revenue, the really vital revenue we raise as a population to fund the things that we need, we are at the really low end, 6th lowest. So we had always said in this discussion about tax reform, we needed to go carefully and very clearly. If we are going to deliver a tax cut for personal income, when we've already had, during the boom era, 8 successive tax cuts on personal income rates, and that we've chosen the 80,000 one, which will benefit the top 20%. If you're a woman, 30% if you're male, that was the wrong choice, and we absolutely oppose it. Duncan's question, you're not right in us to say it doesn't matter at the low end. The interaction between the tax system and the transfer system makes a big difference to people in Duncan's situation. And we had always said to the government we were open to doing something there so that we were providing more benefit for people on low incomes who are going to be getting back into paid work.
All right,
and it will make a big difference to small business.
Guys, we have a lot of other questions to get through.
If we're going to be moving with tax reform, we need some of the tax concessions dealt with, and there's a whole lot of missing in action on that front, and we deliver the tax cuts without
Kelly O'Dwyer,
rolling
a brief
those back.
response.
Very briefly, what I would say is what we've heard from both Labor and the Greens here tonight is that they want to increase taxes, personal income taxes and company taxes. That's going to put a handbrake on our economy. Now, I have sat down with small business because I'm the small business minister and I've talked to them. One of the cafe owners I spoke to the other day has got a turnover of just over 2 million. As a result of our change, our tax cut on the 1st of July of this year, he will have access to the instant asset write-off, which means he can invest in his business. A $6,000 toaster, which means he can get more customers through his business on a Saturday when there's a bottleneck, more customers through his business because toast is that bottleneck that he needs to clear in order to get more people in. He's going to derive more revenue, and he's told me that he is going to put more people on. I mean, this is the result of the changes we are making. It will affect people's lives in a very positive way.
Okay.